Hello, my armchair philosophers. I hope you have a good pair of socks on and a nice cup of coffee. We are going to be starting our Everyman's Guide to Book of the New Sun today. My intention with this series is to give a wholesome understanding to each chapter of Shadow of the Torture. The first volume, this is the first two volumes in Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun. This is a very dense and complicated and mature book. My intention with the series is to make sure that you understand what Gene Wolfe is doing in each chapter, how he's crafting the world, the writing techniques, and the characterization tools he's using to put us in the world and to do some world building, and also just to make sure that you have a general understanding of the plot so that you can more fully enjoy the series. I've heard, well, many people say you don't read a Gene Wolfe book, you reread a Gene Wolfe book. My intention with this is to help you so that your first read through Book of the New Sun is not an absolute slog like mine was. I spent hours studying for each chapter that I read in Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun, and it was more of a kind of a passion project, my first read through, than something I did to enjoy it. On my second read through, I found that I absolutely loved it, even more just because I understood from all of that studying what Gene Wolfe was doing, how he was doing it. And so I'd like to share some of that with you so that maybe on your first read through or on successive read throughs, you can more fully comprehend what Gene Wolfe is doing with the series. Now, just to set some guides for the series, Gene Wolfe was heavily inspired by Tolkien and Jack Vance. This is kind of his take on Jack Vance's Dying Earth series. And Gene Wolfe was a Catholic, so a lot of the images and symbolism that he uses in the series is influenced by his Catholic faith. I would like to, on that note, read a quick quote. It has been remarked thousands of times that Christ died under torture. Many of us have read so often that he was a humble carpenter that we feel a surge of nausea on seeing the words again, but no one ever seems to notice that the instruments of torture were wood, nails, and a hammer. That the man who built the cross was undoubtedly a carpenter too. That the man who hammered in the nails was as much a carpenter as a soldier, as much a carpenter as a torturer. Very few seem even to have noticed that although Christ was a humble carpenter, the only object we're specifically told that he made was not a table or a chair, but a whip. And one last note before we jump right into reading the first chapter in the series is, as a general guide for the series, if a character has the name of a Catholic saint, then that is a human character. If not, they're something else, they're not what they appear. And that's just a good guide and a good tool to the series, just for general direction. So let's jump right into it. Chapter 1 is called Resurrection and Death. And right away, Gene Wolfe is already messing with us. He doesn't give us any space to breathe. Because usually, if you were to be resurrected, we would start with death and then resurrection. But Gene Wolfe starts resurrection and death. The first opening paragraph to the chapter is, "It is possible that I had some presentiment of my future. The lock and rusted gate that stood before us, with wisps of river fog threading its spikes like the mountain paths, remains in my mind now as the symbol of my exile. That is why I have begun this account of it with the aftermath of our swim, in which I, the torture's apprentice Severian, had so nearly drowned." So Gene Wolfe is making things a little more complicated than he needs to, and that's okay. The second chapter in this book actually comes chronologically before this event. So that's why he says, this is why I've begun this account with the aftermath of our swim. The next chapter will give us an account of the swim and what happened and why he nearly drowned. But he's saying, we're standing here at this locked and rusted gate in this fog, And this is an image that's now, as where I am now, this sticks in my mind as a symbol of my exile. So this is a very important image that Severian is reflecting back upon when he starts to write this. So he's standing at this locked and rusted gate in the fog with some friends, Roche and Drott and Ita, who are fellow torturers apprentices with him. And they're trying to get through this locked and rusted gate. So the guard is gone. The guard's not there for some reason. They're very confused as to why. And one of them uses this funny word here, barbican, when referring to the gate. And a barbican is the walled or the outer part of a wall to a city or a castle. So, excuse me. So they're confused as why the guard's not there, but they're trying to get back inside, and it's very apparent that they're not supposed to be doing this. So someone's coming, and they quickly like all line up, pretend like they're not doing anything suspicious. And Severian is still wet from Guile. We waited, so they're wet from the river Guile. The river Guile that they were just swimming in, Guile refers to a Norse river, a river in Norse legend that separated the living and the dead. So Severian nearly drowned in this river that in Norse myth separated the lands of the living and the dead. And these volunteers, or these men, come up to them. They're armed with lanterns and pikes. And Droat, the leader of the Torches Apprentices, kind of shapes up and says, "Hey, we're waiting to get in." And the volunteers reply, "Not until dawn. You better go home." So the volunteers are very aware that there's not supposed to be anyone else here. One of the volunteers says, "We've come to protect our own dead." So these men have volunteered to protect the corpses inside of the graveyard. So there's something suspicious going on with someone doing something with bodies in the graveyard, and they've come to protect them. And they ask them, like, "Well, why are you guys here?" And Droat says, "We're physicians' gallipots." So gallipots, here's Gene Wolfe using an old word again. Gallipots are used to store, they're little earthenware jars used to store the herbs of or medicine that a physician would use. So the volunteers are going to go in, and Ita, the youngest, or and kind of the most sensitive, prickly one of the Torches Apprentices, takes off, and Ita's like, "Oh shoot, we borrowed that kid from his dad to help us gather up herbs, and you need to let us go get him." So the volunteers very reluctantly let them in to go find Ita, who's run off into the fog. And they're wandering around, they're looking. The volunteers have gone off to protect their dead. And then Severian says, "There was a shot, a thing I had never seen before. The bolt of violet energy splitting the darkness like a wedge so that it closed with a thunderclap." So a shot has rang out. It sounds like he's describing it like a laser, like a thunderclap. So the way that Gene Wolfe has been building the world, it feels very fantasy because he's using these old archaic words that no one uses anymore to put us into this fantasy feeling setting that's has a lot of grandeur and majesty and is very atmospheric and very dense. And all of a sudden now we have a laser shooting through the darkness. So Gene Wolfe, it will become very apparent that Gene Wolfe has mixed fantasy and sci-fi here in this wonderful, beautiful way, but he doesn't make it obvious. The first time I read this, I did not pick up that this was a laser. I was just like, what is going on? So this is a laser that shoots, and all of a sudden everyone starts to panic. People are running, volunteers are freaking out. Now someone's obviously there who's doing something nefarious, and Severian starts running, and he runs smack dab into someone. And it says, "He was as solid as a tree. The impact took me off my feet and knocked my breath away. I heard him muttering execrations." It's another word Gene Wolfe is using. Basically, the man is swearing. It's an old word to just say he's using expletives. So, then a whispering sound as he swung some weapon. Another voice called, "What was that?" Someone ran into me. Gone now, whoever he was. I lay still. So he's sitting here, and this is probably one of the members of the party who shot the laser. So he's laying there and he's dead still, and it's so foggy and dark that the man doesn't see him. So there's a woman there and a man, and the woman says, "Open up the lamp." Her voice was like a dove's call, but there was urgency in it. The man I had run against answered, "They would be on us like a pack of doles, ma'am." Another archaic word Gene Wolfe is using. Doles is wolves or a rabid dog. It's spelled Dholes. Doles. They will be on us soon, and well, they will be soon in any case. Vodalus fired. You must have heard it. So whoever fired the shot is a man named Vodalus. Now, Gene Wolfe writes here, well, Severian writes here, in an accent I was too inexperienced to recognize as an exultance. So this woman or this man is an exultant. An exultant is, well, it'll soon be revealed what an exultant is, but it's very important that we remember that. So Assyrian says, my eyes had grown accustomed to the dark, and he's watching, and they're pulling a body out of a grave. So sure enough, the people who the volunteers have come to defend their dead against, well, here's someone pulling bodies out of graves. And the woman asked, how is she? Fresh as a flower, madam. Hardly a breath of stink on her, and nothing to worry about. So this body that they pulled out, the woman is like, hey, is she rotting yet? And the guy says, nope, she doesn't even smell yet. She's fresh. So now it becomes apparent this woman's name is Thea. And let's see here. So Thea and Vodalus are here with another volunteer or two. And the volunteers have spotted them. They're coming down to get them. So the woman and the man take off with the body. It's kind of vaguely imparted here. Let's see here. It says, then he and the man grunted as they pulled, and I saw something white appear at their feet. They bent to lift it. The fog swirled and parted to let a beam of green moonlight fall. They had a corpse of a woman. Her hair, which was been dark, was in some disorder about her livid face. She wore a long gown of some pale fabric. So the volunteers are coming down to get them. I'll take care of this and get Madam to safety. So Vodalus says that he will fend off the oncoming volunteers, and he hands a pistol over to the man. Then he tells them to shoo, and Gene Wolfe uses another word here. He says, as if a dove had momentarily commanded an arctother, the woman took the shining pistol from the heavy man's hand, and together they backed into the fog. So an arctother is an old and extinct ancient type of bear. So this man is like built like a bear, and she's more like a dove. So there are 3 volunteers there facing off now against Vodalus. It says, one had a pike and the others had an axe. So Vodalus is facing off against them. The leader of the volunteers says, who are you? And what power of Erebus's gives you the right to come here and do something like this? So Erebus is a name that will appear later, something else to make note of. The leader graded all together now and will have him, so they're all going to pounce on him. Vodalus fends off 2 of them, and Severian here does something very funny. Watching this man here, Vodalus, who's wearing the sweeping cape and he has a sword and this beautiful woman with him, he's kind of he's the hero in Severian's eyes. Severian sees him as this heroic figure, this heroic character, who in any other story, this would be like the Robin Hood of the story. So right away, Severian is like entranced with this character, and he sees him facing off alone against these men. And it's funny how Severian writes this, very vaguely and kind of more framing it as, I had to defend Vodalus. He takes up a knife and he stabs one of the volunteers to save Vodalus from being cut down with an axe. So Vodalus is shocked, of course, that he's got to get his head cut off, and then Severian stabs this man, and kills him. Votalus retrieves his sword and says, "Who are you?" "Severian. I am a torturer, or rather, I am an apprentice of torturers' liege." Liege. So Votalus says, "Who are you?" "Severian. I am a torturer, or rather, I am an apprentice of the torturers' liege, of the order of the seekers for truth and penitence." So that's the full and correct name of the torturers' guild. "I am a Votalarius, one of the thousands of Votalari of whose existence you are unaware." And he says, "It was a term I had scarcely heard." So this will become apparent, and I do believe the second book. Severian comes up with this name on the spot as a way to kind of flatter Votalus. He comes up with this word Votalarius. "I'm a Votalarius," which basically is like, "Hey, I'm a fanboy. Like, hey, I'm one of the." It's like, "Hey, I'm a deadhead." Like he's like, "Hey, I'm one of you. I'm one of yours." And Votalarius is like very like taken aback. It's like, "Oh, I have fans." And Votalarius hands him something. He lays a coin in Severian's palm, which should be a bit of a warning to us. Maybe I'm overanalyzing here, but Votalarius, if he was a good person, he would be like, "Oh, an act of kindness, I can understand. I can accept an act of kindness freely." But instead, he pays Severian as if Severian's a mercenary. He pays him for his services, for what he's done for him, which should be a little strange to us. And Severian doesn't seem to really notice this. The coin will come back later in the story, but there's this wonderful quote here about symbols where he says, "We believe that we invent symbols. The truth is that they invent us. We are their creatures shaped by their hard defining edges." So Severian saying that sometimes symbols like this symbol is right now, they are more powerful than we can understand, and we don't need to understand them to be affected by them. In fact, he says, "It is a profound mistake to believe that we must know of such things to be influenced by them. And in fact, to believe so is to believe in the most debased and superstitious kind of magic." So Votalus takes off, leaving Severian there alone with the coin in his hand, and he ends the chapter by saying, "It was in this fashion that I began the long journey by which I backed into the throne." So a dense opening to the series. I love that Gene Wolfe spoils the end for us at the very beginning. And that is Gene Wolfe being very confident in what he's writing, because wonderful and good true literature cannot be spoiled. So Gene Wolfe is perfectly cool with telling us how it's going to end. The end does not matter. Gene Wolfe is so confident in this journey that he's writing that the journey matters just as much as the destination, maybe even more. So now, and I also think Gene Wolfe does it for us to pay more attention to what does Severian do, what happens to Severian to put him in a position where he backs into the throne. So Gene Wolfe, wonderful start to the series. I love a few things to make note of is I love how he uses these ancient words to set up this majestic, very archaic, and yet new and fresh setting. So that's that. If you have anything you'd like to say, comments, or any questions, anything I may have missed, please let me know. And I look forward to seeing you for chapter 2.